Stranded as he was in this wilderness, he was now more than ever feeling the absence of his adoring Imogen. His mind was tortured with maudlin despondency. Why did she abandon me? She would know what to do in this situation. Imogen was resourceful. She was self-contained and capable. She seemed to hold within her the solutions to all of life's problems, or challenges, as she insisted on calling them, with her usual positive spin. Somehow she managed to earn enough for her needs from making silver jewellery and selling it in the market. She was frugal, making her own clothes or otherwise buying from charity shops and jumble sales, but never looking less than dazzling, turning heads wherever she went. Imogen was an adventurer. She had travelled widely across Asia, South America, and Africa several times, buying silver jewellery to sell in the market alongside pieces that she had made in her cramped workshop. It was to Rajasthan that she was travelling now. They had first become occasional lovers when Imogen was employed as an art buyer in one of the ad agencies at which Wordsworth worked earlier in his career. He would take her for extravagant lunches at the Tate Gallery restaurant, famous for one of the best wine lists in London. And in the evenings after work, they would perhaps listen to some jazz at Pizza Express or a concert in Hammersmith. But most often they would spend the evenings making love in her flat in Camden Town. He would then leave early enough to be able to convince his wife that he'd been working late. At weekends, they would often drive out to Imogen's favourite village on the Suffolk coast, where they would have tea and scones at a small cafe. But in time, understandably to anyone but Wordsworth, Imogen wanted commitment. She was tired of being the mistress to a married man, his bit on the side, and Wordsworth was incapable of commitment. So with reluctance, she ended their affair, quit her job, left her flat and moved out to Suffolk. She rang him 6 months after leaving to bring him up to date with her life and location, perhaps in the hope that he might ditch everything and come running out to her. He didn't. The thought of living in some grubby provincial market town in the middle of nowhere, places where their smelly pubs closed down with monotonous regularity and restaurants of any quality barely existed, filled him with horror. 2 hours' journey from his beloved London and favourite sushi bar, finding his only companionship among old men in overalls whose sole talking point was the broken drive shaft on their tractor. It was not going to happen. Commitment of that sort was far from his mind. He had done that once. At the gullible age of 23, he married the lovely Lorna, a beautiful dental receptionist at the expensive practice in Kew. Here, for an exorbitant fee, a handsome South African kept West London's teeth bright and healthy, whilst being lulled into a state of mild irritation by the muted tones of Simply Red. But the thought of wooing Lorna kept him coming back, and after a brief courtship they married, and 3 years later she gave birth to their daughter Tiffany, followed 2 years later by a son, Oscar. But the burden of bringing up two children while simultaneously maintaining an active social life was becoming intolerable to her. She would need help, but a nanny would bring her own problems. She would be expected to live in, and the house at Wimbledon was simply not big enough. Wordsworth had bought this house a year or so before Lorna swept him off his feet and into church for their extravagant wedding. Using a deposit, a very generous Christmas bonus given to him after a successful year for the agency, he was rather sad to see it go, especially as he managed to buy it with a relatively small mortgage. But as Lorna never tired of pointing out, he had to be practical. They could get a larger house if they moved out to a cheaper postcode, but of course the schools would be inferior quality and these things needed forward planning. Lorna arrived at the sensible solution and Wordsworth changed jobs for more money, working as senior art director in a large, less creative advertising agency. With his higher salary, they started looking at properties in Twickenham, and the house they settled on, a comfortable 5-bedroom Georgian house not far from the river, was lovely, although requiring an eye-watering loan. It was some distance from the nearest railway station, but a second car solved that minor inconvenience. The sweeping driveway at the front of the house was more than sufficient for 2 cars. Wordsworth soon began to accept the fact that he was falling short of Lorna's expectations. Since she changed agencies, she no longer was able to boast to her friends about the high-profile advertising campaigns he had created and fell quiet about his achievements. His TV commercials no longer featured glamorous locations and famous celebrities. His was now a world of happy families with clean shirts who ate colourful frozen food and threw sticks for their bounding dogs. His homecomings were noticeably less joyful as time went on, and more frequently he would go for a drink after work with people who seemed to enjoy his company. The London advertising industry was known to be populated with good-looking people, and Wordsworth quickly found himself drawn back into the society he thought he'd left behind when he married. And he was pleasantly surprised to discover that women still found him attractive. He became once again a party animal.